Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chris Murphy, and I'm from the Chartered Institution of Waste Management, and it's my pleasure to moderate this session. It's a grand word. I'm going to use that in future, moderator. Before we start, and each of the panelists will introduce themselves and say a little bit about what they are doing for UKTI. Can I just ask you, are you already involved as an exporter? Or you are? Everyone is? Great. Just to get an idea of how we're going to pitch this before we ask you for questions. Just starting to. That's fine. That's fine. So starter and an established exporter. Great. I'm going to hand over to Phil, and Phil's going to introduce himself, say a little bit about what he does with UKTI in the export field.
Good afternoon, everybody. Phil Potter. I am an export finance advisor working for the government agency UK Export Finance, working alongside UKTI as a sort of a prettier sister, if you like, but much smaller. I'm one of 24 around the UK, and our job is to work with exporters, giving them impartial advice around raising finance, specifically helping people to understand the financial risks in exporting, helping to mitigate those risks either by finding solutions for you and people to work with in the private sector, or if necessary or appropriate, to bring UK government guarantees to help you to raise extra finance from your bankers, and also to help plug the risks of non-payment through credit insurance where the private sector can't cover adequately because of the markets. And an example might well be working in the Ukraine or Russia at present, where there's no appetite in the private sector, but where UK government is still able to provide some support. I'm an ex-banker of 30 years plus, so I actually know how the banking system actually works. A lot of my colleagues are very similar, so when it comes to actually finding a partner to work with, we will certainly be on the right side of the table with the exporter to help them to get the best that they possibly can from their bankers using government support.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name's Nick Corley. I'm an international trade advisor. I work in the West Midlands, based at the Chamber of Commerce in Worcestershire. For the benefit of those of you that don't know, UKTI has been around for many, many years in various kind of guises. Some of you old enough might remember the old British Overseas Trade Board, which kind of evolved into DTI's Overseas Trade Services and became Trade Partners UK, and now UK Trade and Investment. Two functions. One is to support businesses to inwardly invest in the UK. Or the bit that we work on is about trade. It's about the balance of trade, and it's about helping companies export more, or companies that don't export begin to export. We have a bit of a tough target to hit by the end of the decade to address the balance of trade and have £1 trillion worth of new exports. So hopefully we'll get on with it, please. It would be enormously helpful to us. Our network is huge. I mean, we have 9 English regional teams. As I mentioned, I work for the West Midlands regional team. Obviously, we have an office based in London. We have another team based in Glasgow that take care of overseas trade fairs. And we have teams in just about every single High Commission, consulate and embassy overseas. So to give you a kind of an understanding of our global reach, for those that you can see the map there, that's our presence overseas. And we have a number of services and a number of experts to help plug into new markets, expand or increase market share in existing markets, and really that's what we're all about. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. And perhaps from the other side of the non-existent fence, Michael.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Michael Oswell from RS Hydro. We're actually the client or the receiving end of the support that UKTI are providing. We are based in Bromsgrove. We are an SME, so we're target audience, and we're a growing business. We're involved in the environmental sector, water quality, flow, everywhere really, from gold mines, literally, through to sewage farms. We've worked in Mauritania, worked in Dubai, we've worked in Guinea and the UK. We kind of stumbled into exporting, where the demand for our product and our technology, our services, our expertise was kind of demanded, and we stumbled into exporting. With the support of UKTI, it's given us a bit more of a focus, and thanks to the passport to export, it's helped us pick and choose what we do and do it with less risk, more security, and rather than wander vaguely around different opportunities, we've been able to pick and choose.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Michael. So there's a flavour of what the experts on the panel and a recipient of that expert advice have been up to. We have a number of further issues we'd like to explore, but this is for you, ladies and gentlemen. So if you've got any specific questions from your own circumstances or what you've heard today, please shout out and we can provide you. Sir.
Hi, Brendan Murphy, Taylor Benz. Quick question for Phil. We've been exporting for many, many years, but we've always been doing it on letter of credit. So when you're talking about the support that you can offer British businesses exporting, what are the alternatives that you can offer to help us?
Okay, so this is about how you get paid, yeah? Presently, letter of credit's your favoured option.
Primarily.
Yeah.
Our cash is even better.
Well, yeah. Well, you've got four options, basically. The first one is getting your cash up front, which is brilliant. But there aren't that many businesses out there prepared to let go of their money to you without wanting something back in return, which may well be a guarantee back from your bank. Your bank will typically want to sit on that cash anyway, so that if they do get a call on the guarantee, they've got the cash to pay it. Where we can help with that, potentially, is providing a guarantee to your bank from UK government to enable them to use that as security for that guarantee to release the cash back to you so you can get on with manufacturing, in your case, your bins. The next option is letter of credit, which, as you will know from the technicalities of that, can be fraught with a few challenges around making sure your documentation is right. Your only option from that is moving away to more risky things for you, and there are only two other options. One is where you use the banking system to send documents out to your buyer, who will pay for those documents and therefore collect the goods at the docks, which doesn't involve them in a credit line, so it's better for them. But you've still got the challenge that if they don't sign for those documents, you've got goods on the docks which you've got to fetch back. And finally, it's you paying or taking open account trading, by completely sort of shipping your goods and hoping they pay. Your options to cover that will be credit insurance, to ensure that if they don't pay or can't pay, that you will get your money back from an insurer. That's principally a private market area, where government supports is where some of those markets I mentioned earlier, Ukraine, Russia, a bit more tricky where the private sector won't go. We can do that. Where we specialise is principally in the sovereign risk. That's usually where there are issues around the country, such as Russia, Ukraine, Libya, problems that have been in Egypt, in other more challenging markets, rather than the European Union where we can't help, or rich OECD markets where, again, we can't help. So there are only four options of payment, and you have to select one of those. Where you are with letters of credit at the minute is a good place to be, so you have some control. Money up front is even better. But the further away from that you move, the more risk you're taking, and you need to be very careful about who you're trading with to ensure that you're comfortable with what's actually happening.
So if we extend a line of credit into an export customer, UKTI offer credit insurance?
UK Export Finance will offer credit insurance in the event that the private sector can't do that.
Right.
And we have to explore the private sector first. We're not set up to compete with the private sector. They have to have the opportunity to find that first. If they can't find it, or they're pricing it to an extent where they clearly don't want the risk, then we can get involved.
Thank you.
Michael, do you want to mention how you resolve your financial?
We've actually been quite lucky with our cash flow. We've been able to use both ends of the spectrum. We take the standard kind of credit safe or Experian risk assessment on UK and Ireland we consider to be an export market. and then prepayment. So maybe with a performance bond attached to that for late delivery or technical ability. And prepayment is our preference, of course. Cash is king.
Okay, any further questions? Yes.
Is it likely that most countries or companies you're dealing with will understand letter of credit? Is it likely?
Universally acceptable, is that what you're asking?
Yeah, pretty much.
Letters of credit are an internationally recognised form of trade settlement. Some markets use them more frequently than others. Asia is typically a market that does. You go to Europe and it's less likely that they would want to use letters of credit. They much prefer to operate on open account trading, particularly within EU markets. And certainly if you go to the States, then they'd want open account trading terms probably as their first port of call. But everyone will start their negotiations with you taking all the risk, and you want to start with, let's have the cash up front. And it's about where you feel comfortable sitting in the middle. And once you've agreed that, it's about mitigating that risk. But letters of credit universally accepted.
But less likely in the EU, say?
Less likely in the EU, but probably more so since there have been some financial issues around those economies. So by all means ask, but less likely.
Okay, thank you.
We've covered the financial issues there. Gentlemen, what are the strategies, key strategies should you be addressing before you get into the export market?
Well, first of all, come and speak to us. As I mentioned in my introduction, we have a lot of expertise. We have a huge network, and very often, if we can't answer those questions internally, there will be someone within our network that can answer those questions for you. But certainly, if you are new to export, then, as I say, we should be your first port of call because we can introduce you to some useful advice and tips, put you on a strategic program, and handhold you through 12 months, providing you access to our network, potentially a little bit of money to kind of match fund some activity, and so on and so forth.
For first-time exporters, I would say just consider the risk. Are these markets or countries that we want to deal with? Have we got the right expertise? The best bit of advice I was ever given is, what's the worst that can happen? Now, you can look at that two ways. Is if it goes wrong, can I afford to write that off? And the other way you could look at it is, it's probably something that we should at least think about. What's the worst that can happen? Go through every scenario and get some advice. There's plenty of ways of connecting with UKTI. Passport to Export will provide support and masterclasses that certainly helped us on the finance and the marketing side of things. And be prepared to say no. You don't have to say yes. And that was a risk area that we got into to begin with, where we stumbled into jobs and we found that supporting them from a technical basis ongoing maybe started to erode some of the margin. But then as we got a bit more mature and a bit more savvy about the jobs that we take on, then maybe we'd build an extra bit of price in there to cover the risk, or we'd actually have to walk away, which no one likes to do, but sometimes it's the right decision.
No, I think, again, from a finance perspective, you have to understand the implications of exporting. Even if you're a very, very simple export and you've sold something across the internet, it just takes that little bit longer to get your cash. Your working capital cycle is extended, even if it's only by a couple of days. So just understand the implications, the impact on your cash. And I think the critical question that was asked earlier on is about how you get paid. Make sure you understand the options and which is the best for you and for your product, and what you can negotiate. But again, I think Michael's suggestion there about don't be frightened to say no. If someone's offering you terms that you don't want and you think the risk is too great for you and you can't afford to lose that money, you can't cover the risk, and just say no. If they want your product or your service, then hopefully they'll find a way of negotiating the right deal for you.
You mentioned that insurance risk would has to go to the private sector first before you can. Are there any other limits to what you can offer? And is all the service free? Perhaps you could. Did you have to pay for any of the advice, the guidance that you got from UKTI?
I think going back a year, we started on passport to export. It's £250, is that right?
I'll give you a brief overview of Passport to Export. I think I mentioned it's a strategic programme that lasts for a period of 12 months, whereby we take a company who is either completely new to exporting, maybe a novice exporter, or exporting quite a bit, but maybe in a kind of passive reactive way, what we call non-strategic. And hopefully at the end of that 12 months, they come out the other end a little bit more savvy. They may have entered into a new distribution agreement to achieve some first sales overseas and everything else. In terms of the offer, at the moment the offer is, you pay £200 to get in the programme. For that we give you a workshop which lasts for a whole day, where you sit with 8 to 10 other companies. You come out the other end of that, you meet up with your trade advisor, and we sit down together and we map out a very, very simple plan. The plan could be, what do you aim to achieve by the end of the 12 months, and what activities we can agree, and how UKTI intervention and how we can facilitate, various services to improve or obviously help that kind of journey much more easier for you. We can give you as part of that deal what we call free masterclasses, ranging from getting paid, export documentation, letters of credit, exhibition masterclass, and so on and so forth. Those are free of charge. Digital marketing, website development, and perhaps a bit of money, maybe up to £500 in the current offer to match fund activity. Now that activity could benefit from travelling to an overseas market to follow up some leads, or it could even be to maybe have your website translated into a specific market. So that's roughly Passport to Export. Michael, I think I've got that.
Yeah, when we started on Passport to Export, I think the money was £1,000 we had, which was match funded. So we were able to do some trade shows and travel, and it was match funded. Would we have done them? Maybe, but having it match funded just make that decision a lot easier. As well as the masterclasses, which we found quite useful. There was networking opportunities to meet similar businesses. So being with like-minded people that are interested in exporting, there was certain connections made and tips picked up along the way, just like hopefully today is, that you'll actually benefit from as much as the masterclass itself.
Yeah, very quickly, we do charge for some of our services, sadly. It's our teams overseas who provide market information for our clients do offer a service which is a subsidised chargeable service. It's not a lot of money for what you get. I mean, I'm happy to speak about that in more detail, but certainly, the reason that the government charges is to get rid of time wasters, and the belief is that if you pay for something, you value it and you act upon the information that's being given, and that's actually absolutely key to us, because of course, in terms of our performance measurement or the way we're measuring performance, it's all about success, it's all about business wins. So people that commission work need to be doing something with it, otherwise our guys overseas are basically running around like headless chickens, barking the wrong tree and not helping the companies that really are going to take on board the advice and support that's been given. In terms of where the money goes, it goes to the Treasury. We're not salespeople. We don't earn commission. As I say, the network doesn't receive any kickback. It goes straight back to the Treasury, and I'm sure they're very appreciative of that money coming in, especially now these times.
Yeah, just to pick up on Chris's original question around the cost of services, our advice, everything you can pick from our brains is absolutely free. If you were to need credit insurance, you'll pay a premium, as you would expect, for that insurance cover. Where we work with the banks to provide them with guarantees, whether it be through supporting advance payment guarantees or other bonds or working capital needs, that is again free of extra cost to you. Effectively, if we give a guarantee of anything up to 80% to a bank, they will charge you their normal fees for their facility, and we will share their income pro rata to our risk. So we'll take 80% of their fees and their interest, so you actually pay nothing extra. And thankfully, just at the moment, we pay more into Treasury than we actually pay out in claims. So at the minute, we're government's favourite people.
Good for you.
Any questions out there?
Just in terms, this is for Michael, yeah. Just in terms of when you first kind of exported your products, did you have to kind of adapt any of them for the specific markets that you were entering?
In terms of our work in Africa and Mauritania, yes, we had to tropicalise them. So we had to find an engineering solution based on the humidity and the temperature difference that we would normally experience in the UK. In terms of the engineering side of things, we work with the client as we would with any other client to define the scope of work and the outputs, the characteristics that they wanted. So we didn't have to go through any approvals to get the African version of CE marking or TUV marking. We were lucky enough to be able to say, well, we had the courage to say no and push back on a certain number of things. We realised that we'd got an opportunity that could be converted on those terms, and we negotiated our way through it.
Perhaps I could ask Brendan, is it? Yeah. You export containers which meet a SEN standard, which I assume is acceptable worldwide, although it's a European standard. Have you ever had to modify the bins for particular local circumstances?
Absolutely. The customer is always right. And if they want some modifications to our products, fine. I mean, we want to make sure that the product doesn't come back, it doesn't cause harm. It's used in an environment which, we have to be conscious of the health and safety risk. So we won't modify a product where it becomes unsafe. But if a customer wants some specific features added or changed, we'll work with them.
It's got to be worthwhile, obviously. To do that.
Absolutely, yeah.
So gentlemen, those of you who are exporting, looking at in retrospect, was it worthwhile balancing the risks against the benefits, the barriers, and how you overcome them? Was it worthwhile doing? Will you do it again if you're starting from cold?
Yeah, absolutely. As a business, we've grown really strongly. We've gone from 1.85 to 2.1 million, and we'll probably do 3 million this year. So most of that has come through export, £500,000 on one contract. So the momentum that we created early on, and also the kind of credibility in the case studies and the references. So if you're a first-time exporter, the client's going to take a risk, a bit of a punt on you. Second and third time, you've got a credibility. And if you've worked in harsh environments, you've worked abroad, then they're quite happy to consider you then for their opportunities. So you need that momentum, and it's tough trying to get that first one, but it's doable.
And if clients come back and they have barriers which you see on a regular occasion, what can UKTI do to address those barriers, say cultural or local specifications?
Well, first of all, is access to information and knowledge from our teams overseas. Very often, those kinds of queries, inquiries can be answered fairly quickly. Cultural aspects, we can address those locally. We have in the West Midlands, and I think the other 9 English regions may have adopted the same model. We have a language and cultural advisor who can obviously give you some useful tips, signpost you to organisations that can help overcome those issues. She will run masterclasses on various markets, explaining the do's and the don'ts when entering into new markets, and so on and so forth. Additionally, what we call postgraduate placement. So if you are looking to establish someone within your business, especially if you're a new exporter and you're looking to enter a market where language and culture could be an issue, then we might be able to find you a student for a few months to work as part of their dissertation within your business to help break into those markets. So yeah, we've got most bases covered on language and culture.
I just realised the irony of a Geordie asking a question about language and culture, but there we are. Are there any other questions or comments from?
Michael or anybody, I suppose. What do you think are your most effective marketing channels? Is it to go to a trade show, use a distributor? Are you able to prospect directly from the UK and email, etc., LinkedIn? Have you got any idea of what's the most effective and maybe what direction you go in the future? To anybody?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I'm not a big fan of trade shows, but actually travelling up to Hall 4, and I wish Hall 3 was open, maybe we should have been at this one. Our success has really come from SEO. So if you guys want to go back and check your own webpage, make sure that you're properly optimizing Google SEO, because that's really your number one channel. We were using Google Ads. Google's changed and it continues to evolve in terms of getting your ranking higher and higher. So we're around about a 3/4. It goes on a scale of 1 to 5. It's exponential. So when we get to 4, we'll be quite happy with that. You can't cheat Google. You can. You've got to use the rules. So go back and check your website. Make sure it's responsive on mobile devices. 60-70% of web traffic now is on mobile devices, and if they're not responsive, you'll fall down the rankings. Use the meta tags to try and get as much of your product name and placement in those. We're not big into paper advertising at all. We've got a number of domains that .ie, and to give a local feel. We consider Ireland as an export market, even though it's just across the water. We have a chat facility on our webpage as well, which is staffed as often as we can get people. As soon as people log on, it's staffed. And I think that for us has been our biggest success. Having the credibility in the case studies as well, so you can relate to that particular industry or that application. And that's another way to get.
Yeah, you seem to have got the website covered there, Michael. Many companies haven't, and this is where UKTI again can come in and support that area of the business by a service offer called the Export Communication Review, whereby we can get someone to your business to have a look at your website. Your website will be analysed completely, and you will give a report. What the review will undertake is things like SEO, how it connects to social media, things like aesthetics, translations, and so on and so forth. I mean, these guys can actually set their laptop up to pretend that it's in Moscow and look at your website as a Russian would. And so, yeah, very useful. What you will be provided with is basically a report with a list of things that you need to do to get your website much more international, much more accessible to overseas people, and much more acceptable to overseas markets. So the report will contain that data from what we call very quick fixes, silly things like having 0044 on your phone number, believe it or not, some people don't, right through to the much more kind of technical stuff. What you will get is a template then to take to your web developer to say, this is what I need to do to my website to get it up to scratch. What we don't do is give you the report and say we know someone that can fix it for you and charge you a lot of money. It ends at the report and that's it. Okay. And by the way, there's a cost of that, it's £250, but worth every penny, I assure you. I don't know anyone who's had one of these who hasn't given us very good feedback about it. Export Communication Review, thank you. Sales pitch over.
Thank you. Perhaps I'll ask each of you to make some closing remarks and reiterate what the offer is out there and what you've benefited from, Michael.
So just to cover off where we are as a department, credit insurance where the private sector can't help, and really specifically to help where the banks have got some appetite to work with you but need a bit of help to get to where you need to be. That's in round figures where that sits. Just keep in touch with what might actually be happening going forward, because talking earlier about what have we seen from the market and what we need to do, we're governed by an Act of Parliament. And in March last year, a new Act of Parliament was passed, which gives us greater powers. So going forward, we're looking to develop new products which will not only help businesses who are directly exporting, but help businesses who are actually supplying businesses that export, and also ultimately to help businesses who have export as part of their needs, but where we'll be able to support the whole of the working capital and not just the export part. So lots of developments taking place which will actually broaden our effectiveness in working with UK exporters with a view to helping Nick to achieve his £1 trillion target, no, our £1 trillion target for the UK economy. So the more we can do, the better, but that's what's coming down the line.
Yeah, just to kind of confirm that, UKTI isn't here just to help new and novice exporters. We're here to help any company of any shape or size, as long as they can prove there's a clear value add to the UK. An example will be JLR. JLR invests a lot of time with UKTI and have spent a lot of money launching their products overseas using our overseas network. I suppose our USP is that we're government, which means we're objective. We've got nothing to sell. There's nothing in it for us other than your success. So my advice to you will be to contact your local trade advisor. Very simple thing to do. Get onto our website, type in the postcode, find out where you can find us, and pick up the phone and speak to them. Thank you.
Well, from our perspective, it isn't rocket science. Only rocket science is rocket science. So exporting is very valuable for our business. It gives our employees a much greater sense of engagement in the business, that they're talking with people overseas. It's really good for our business. So and great thanks to UKTI for sort of accelerating our growth.
Thank you, Michael.
So there we have. If there's no more questions, there we have it. That's the UKTI offer. Not to be sniffed at. If you're looking at exporting or continuing to export, UKTI can help you do that. It's to your benefit. It's to the benefit of UK PLC. So please come and talk to us, and I'm sure we can help you. And we've got a lot of experience, as you've heard today. So thank you very much for your attention. Hopefully you'll be doing more work with UKTI, and I think I'd like you to thank the expert speakers in the usual way. Thank you.